All right. So we got Brad Miller here. He's a professor with the Bauer School at the University of Houston. And you're teaching, what I had first learned about you was through the your supply chain management course. I saw these videos that had been posted on YouTube from your students taking your class that were applying in their real, in their home life and in projects on campus, these methods that you were teaching them. And then you were uploading a lot of your own personal videos. And so I was just really impressed with the program as a way to really get people to practice with real-life applications of these tools and concepts. And then I had noticed some of the, a couple of the projects were related to the nonprofit, which is something that our division is really trying to promote, is how do we get these concepts into organizations that are working on like sustainable development goals and important issues. So maybe you could start with a little bit of background, how you got into your background, we just briefly touched on, but also then your teaching career. Maybe we'll start there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I started my career in manufacturing, and my undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering, and so got a degree in manufacturing. And I didn't really know, being young, right out of school, didn't really know what it was that I was destined to do. But got into manufacturing and making things. The first company I worked at, we were making shopping carts. And I guess the short story of how I got into process improvement was I was young, newly married, and we were headed into a busy season. The demand had just ramped up, and so my boss told me, hey, you've been doing good managing this little part of the manufacturing process on first shift. I want you to manage the whole second shift. You know, just come in and you'll manage the whole thing. And I'll tell you what, I started that. I didn't really know what second shift was all about, but I started doing that, and I hated it. I did not want to be there on second shift. Just the hours were terrible for being a newlywed. My wife was working too, so we never saw each other. So I went into my boss and said, I don't like this. I don't want to do this anymore. And he said, well, we got to have, the second shift on because we have to double our capacity. And this is the only way to do it. Now, I don't know, if you can figure out a way to get twice as much done with the same people in first shift, then, we won't have to do it. And so I didn't know anything about process improvement. All I knew is, I guess, some of the systems thinking from mechanical engineering, and just looking at the process and seeing how the process was working and what it was we were trying to accomplish and what people were doing. And I ended up working with him, and we figured out a way to more than double the production just doing it on first shift. And when we did that, I mean, there were a lot of challenges and things, of course, going through it, but when I did it, I looked back and I said, well, this was fun. Like, I enjoyed this, and so that's kind of where I learned that this is what I really enjoy doing, and just realized that I'd really been doing this for a long time, thinking this way, and just really enjoyed it. So pursued learning more about it, got to practice in other companies, a company making silicon wafers for the semiconductor industry, and one making high security door locks. And progressively, lean was becoming more popular in manufacturing, and started to get to experience some of that, some of the concepts, and then sort of pursued it on my own, learning and practicing on my own as well. So I realized that the part of my job that I really enjoyed was coaching and teaching others how they can improve their own work. And so investigated a variety of ways to do that. That's when I got involved with academics. Got a PhD in industrial engineering, went up and taught process improvement and Lean Six Sigma concepts at the Ohio State University for a while, and now down in Houston at the Bauer College of Business here in Houston, and love it. I love teaching the concepts, bringing some of my experience that I had in manufacturing to the classroom. And I tell my students this I'll teach. So, for instance, this fall I'll teach about almost 150 students these concepts from Lean and Six Sigma, and I tell them, all of them will learn the concepts and the definitions and how the things work together. But I always tell them there will be a few of you, and it's usually, I don't know, somewhere between maybe 15, 20 out of those students that I feel really kind of get it. And as I'm talking with them, like their eyes brighten up and open up, and you can really tell something has clicked in their mind that this is a new way of thinking about how work gets done. So that's kind of what I live for, is that moment, those moments when people really understand it and they can begin to apply it for themselves.
Yeah, that's great. You also mentioned about kind of the practical application of those concepts, like that's what you liked, that it wasn't so much maybe getting wrapped up in the academia side of it.
Yeah, so I think before a few moments ago when we were sort of you and I were getting to know each other a little better, I was just saying I like teaching in the business college because I get to teach those industrial engineering, Lean Six Sigma concepts, and we use the math. The students are required to understand some of the math behind it, but the bigger piece of process improvement is how the math translates into changing the way people work, and that doesn't happen in a command. It doesn't happen well, in my opinion, in a command and control environment. I'm the boss. I'm telling you this is the way we're going to do things. Do it the way I'm saying. That tends to backfire. I know that from experience. That was my first job role, trying to change people's. Got lots of stories about that, but trying to change people's way of doing work. And wow, it was like it was like pushing a rope. It was just not fun at all. But that it works so much better when your management practices, you actually change the culture in the organization, so that the people in the organization come up with these ideas, come up with ways of improving on their own, and many times they're actually able to change things or make improvements better than you would. So so I love doing that.
And then I've noticed that like supply chain management seems to teach this quite a bit. Probably that and the industrial engineering, in terms of like people who are coming out of school with some of this knowledge already, which I think is great that we're seeing more and more students with getting introduced to this in the school level. So, but I was just kind of surprised. I never expected the supply chain management to be a driver of that as well, but I guess it makes sense to me as I think about what they do. And so is that something that's changed over the years? Has that always kind of been there, or has this kind of been a part of the supply chain management growth in that field?
Yeah, I think the terminology, the concept of a field of study called supply chain management is relatively new. Packaging that together, the way that I explain this to students is, I don't know when many of your viewers were in school, but I know when I was in school, we took a class called operations management, right? Which was, this is how we manage our operation and how we do things inside of this little box. And of course, we have to interact with suppliers and we have to interact with customers. That's kind of part of it, but most of the meat of what really happens is inside of this little box. And people started to realize, when every company along what we now refer to as the supply chain, when every company does that, tries to optimize their own little black box, they end up sub-optimizing the entire supply chain, where everybody's sort of looking out for themselves. And it's just like in a manufacturing process where you have multiple processes up. I can do something in my step of the process that makes things very good for me, but makes it worse for the next person down the line. And companies were realizing, we can really offer our products and services higher quality, cheaper, faster, if we collaborate together and figure out ways to optimize the entire chain, or to move toward higher efficiencies in the entire chain, as opposed to sub-optimizing the individual parts. But a lot of the concepts, there's a lot of overlap between supply chain management and industrial engineering. Everything from inventory management, warehouse optimization, the way that material management moves around a business, way inventory moves around a business, or the way that you manage your inventory levels, of course, with Lean and Six Sigma, the operations piece, how the actual work gets done, as well as figuring out logistics algorithms for where to put warehouses, or how to move trucks around and move material around a country. Yeah. So all of those things are kind of more born in industrial engineering, and the math concepts are heavy into the industrial engineering side. But again, in supply chain management, in every one of our classes, we focus on the management components of, if you are a manager managing these things, how do you coordinate the work of the people that are working for you to actually make that happen? How do you build those relationships? How do you build that culture? So,
yeah, okay, cool. So you have the students who are going through one of the particular classes, I think, where you're teaching Lean. Mm-hmm. I noticed that they have a very simple, like a quick Kaizen or a 2-second Lean type of improvement, and then it kind of escalates up to a little bit bigger improvement, and then maybe a full Kaizen at the end. Is that how I'm understanding, just kind of looking at the videos?
Yeah, in my class, the way it's structured, they're different assignments. So I feel like, and I'm sure you and many of your viewers can sense this, it's different to learn about Lean, or to learn about Lean concepts, tools, techniques, and Six Sigma as well. It's different when you actually practice them. Now, some of the practice we can do in the classroom. So, in the class, I can do a sim where I can get students in smaller groups, and we can do a root cause analysis, and I can walk them through each of the groups, kind of going through that and seeing how that personal interaction works with that, or an interrelationship diagram, or a prioritization matrix. And those are things that they can then experience in the classroom. But one thing that is going to be more meaningful to students is if they actually make improvements in their own life. And I found that if students are able to improve their own processes, things that are meaningful to them, it'll tend to stick more. And again, like I mentioned before, not with everybody, but but I get a better hit rate if I can do that. So I force all of my students to do one small improvement, and that idea comes from Paul Akers, who's a real proponent of the 2-second Lean, just to fix what bugs you. If something's not right, let's just make the change and fix it. And it's something really, really simple. I don't want to bore all your people, but this is just one of mine from just recently. Is on my phone case, I've got these little port, you probably can't see it on the camera, but I've got these little port covers, because they get filled with lint. And one I like using when I am in the car, because I've got an older car, I plug in instead of using Bluetooth. And so I've got this one port that, for where the headphones go in, the headphone jack or the audio jack. And it was hard for me to pull that out with the phone case and those sorts of things. So what I did is I just tied a thread around it, a real short thread, so that it's real easy. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just on a thread. Yeah. And it's easy for me to pull out, easy for me to find, easy for me to put back in. That cost me nothing, right? It was like a little piece of thread. I just tied it around there. But it makes, and it's a small improvement, but it's those sorts of things that I want students to experience, to say you don't have to, struggle with this thing and just say, well, that's just the way life is. You also don't have to go on Amazon and look for the expensive technology solution. Well, I just need a new phone with, that's able to do something different. pretty easy. It didn't take me much time. It didn't take any money at all, and you can make that change. And so I want students to experience that. I force every one of them to do one of those. I give them opportunities to do others for extra credit. But then some of the project videos that you see online is a full semester project, and I lead them through the entire process of improving a real process, something that's meaningful to them in their lives, or something that one of the students can experience. Some of them don't have access to work locations, so they'll sort of reorganize someone's kitchen and work it around the meal cooking processes in a kitchen. But a lot of the students, you mentioned nonprofits, some of them are volunteering different places, and so they'll do it at the places where they volunteer. A lot of them have internships and co-ops, and so they'll do these projects at their co-ops or their internships, the places where they're working. They'll find a process, a real business process where they can see that there's problems, and then they work over the semester at how to improve it. And we start with me teaching them how to identify waste, and that's kind of how we scope out the projects. As I say, you just have to be able to see the waste. You don't have to know how to fix it. You just have to be able to see that there's waste. If you see that there's waste, we can find ways to improve it. Their teams of typically 4, 5, 6 students each. And they go in, they start looking at waste, they map out the processes, we do some analytics on the processes. They work with the employees that are actually doing the work in those businesses to figure out ways to improve. And I really coach the students that you are not telling the company or telling the workers how to improve their work. You are leading them through the improvement process that I'm leading you through in class. You become the teacher, and you get to teach these same concepts to the people that are in those processes, and you're going to be collaborative and figure this out. I guess one of my favorite, now this isn't, we can talk about the nonprofits. I know that's what you guys are really interested in, and those that you brought up were really interesting, but one of my favorites was, one of my students came to me and she said, hey, she said, my dad owns a mechanic shop, he's a car mechanic. He owns this little shop, and he does transmission rebuilds and replaces transmissions. She says that I can see, when I walk into the shop, I can see, it looks like some of the things you showed us in class, that there's some waste there. She said, the problem is I've never helped him do anything in the shop. She said, I don't know anything about cars or anything about building transmissions, so I don't know how we're going to do this. I said, tell me, what waste do you see? And she told me some of the things that she could see waste-wise, and I said, then we can fix it. I said, but you aren't the one that is going to do the project. It's your dad who's going to. This is the first time, that you got your teacher telling you can let your parents do your homework this time, because your dad's going to do this project, and you and your team will be there to facilitate, be there to be a resource for him to do a lot of the heavy lifting, the physical work. But you're going to teach him to be able to see waste, and then he will figure out ways of improving this. And I remember her telling me, she said, I told my dad about this, but he said, well, you're welcome to come and let your group work in my shop and help me out with this. He said, but I've been doing this for 20 years. I've already figured out the best way to build a transmission. So but I want to help you. So if you say it's helpful to you and your professor lets you do it, then great. Come on in and we'll show you around. He ended up, and that video is up on YouTube, but I forget what it was. It was something like he reduced the time it takes to rebuild a transmission by 60% or something like that, and it cost him less than $50 in material stuff to organize things to make it happen. And anyway, it's those are fun to see.
Yeah. And I think that those concepts are really applicable in business too. I mean, there's I think people think, well, I'm working for a company and they got money, and so we're going to go straight to some kind of high-tech solution or fancy solution because I want to make it look nice and make it look like I came up with this awesome, cool solution, but
Right.
I think it's really actually, when you get in there, it is really practical solutions like that that are most effective.
Yeah.
And you can actually get somewhere without, oh, we got to get a quote, and then we got to wait 3 weeks and compare, and then you put it in place and it doesn't work, and
Yep.
now you're even in worse situations. So these like low-cost solutions are really the right way to go.
Yeah, it's creativity first, and I tell my students,
Yep.
I say, look, in these projects, it's low cost or no cost. That's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and some students will say, well, you know, the company said that they've wanted to buy, you know, I don't know, some piece of technology to help improve the process, and they've already committed to doing it. And I tell them, that's fine. They can, you know, if that's what the company wanted to do and they're going to put that in, then great. I said, but you're not for the project. You won't get credit. That won't contribute toward your grade at all, because I want you to use the no cost, low cost, creative solutions where all you're doing is really removing waste. You know, the thing that we say in Lean, you know, if you just take automation or some piece of technology and try to replicate a process, many times what you end up doing is you end up replicating the waste. You end up automating waste, just buying some. And then when the process changes, which it will, and when the customer needs change, all of a sudden your technology is out of date, obsolete, and you've got to buy something new.
Or you're stuck with that solution.
Be creative. Yeah, exactly. It limits you then, right? So let's be creative, and it's fun.
Cool. So how was the connection made with the students? They already had a connection with the nonprofits like Healing Souls and Project Cure, or did they go seek that out? Because I think that's something we're trying to figure out with our division, is how can we connect up the students with an organization, preferably a nonprofit in their area, and how can that connection, or I guess what has worked on with those organizations or other organizations like that in terms of making that initial connection, and is that established relationship really important? Is that a key thing, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I've done it both ways. I have for projects in the past had a company that has approached me and said, hey, we'd like you to do an event, you know, at our location with students, and use that as a project. And I've done that if the company provides a lot of, if the company is willing to provide that support. I will tell you that the projects that I do now, I mean, large majority is the students going out and finding that themselves. And the reason that I think that works best is that they have established relationships in those companies. So they've been working as an intern. They know the people that are in those job roles. You know, they've been working with the managers. They have those established relationships. So much about Lean and the way that you improve processes is building and sustaining those relationships, that the projects become easier if there's an established relationship there already, where people are actually doing the work. A lot of times it's what the students do. So, you know, in an internship, they have a job role, and in their job role they see a lot of that waste, and they say, I just want to make an improvement to my own job. I mean, that's the best, you know, the best way to do a project. In the two cases that you brought up with the nonprofits, Project Cure, and then the Healing Souls organization, there was a student in each of those groups that that's just what they did. They volunteered there. You know, they wanted to give back to the community, and that's kind of what they had a passion around. And so they of course asked their their supervisors at those companies, hey, can I bring in some more students and improve these parts of the process? And but it was they were already doing the work. They were already involved with it. They were frustrated with the way the processes were going, and they wanted it to be better, but they didn't know how. And so they explored it using Project, and those two really turned out well.
Okay, yeah. So I think it does sound like that's an important element, is to have that connection, or work with an organization that you already have a foot in the door, or I've already kind of reached out to them. And I'm wondering if it comes off better as students approach versus if you were out there trying to make the connections. Would it be as easy, or would they embrace it more, or maybe it is better that the students are the ones making the contact?
For me, now I think I think your organization you could probably find ways to do it in different ways for the context of my class. It works out best if the students are the ones that are initiating that relationship, because they're able to keep that ball rolling. So a lot of times in an organization, I found that the management in an organization, things pop up. I mean, my projects are a whole semester long, right? So during that semester, the managers get distracted by other things that are happening, and in the business, understandably so. And so then, this little student group that wants to come in sort of takes a backseat to, whatever else is happening in their business that's commanding their attention. And students, I think my students have a different perspective if they are handed a project and they say, oh, hey, group, you can do your project in this company. Then there's kind of that sense that, well, then, this company should be helping to facilitate how that project goes, which I think that the company should, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Whereas if it's the students that have taken the initiative, they have the drive. They have that sort of internal motivation to say, no, this is what I want to improve. I'm going to make this happen, and it's they initiated it. They're the ones that built that relationship to make that happen, to get in there. And so they're the ones that end up seeing it through. And I'll often see projects where there's difficulties or challenges midway through with just accessibility in the organization. And then, the students that have chased after those opportunities themselves, they sort of have that energy to go and push forward to make that happen, that project happen.
So are you the coach basically for their project? So they're coming back with, here's what we learned, here's what we did, and you're asking those questions and kind of leading them through that project?
Yes. So the way I manage my projects is that I have milestones, baby step milestones all the way through. So for instance, one of the first steps is find a project and tell me what it is and why you think this might be a good project. I want them to tell me about the waste that's in there, right? Then another milestone is show me a video of the process happening. And that way, it's not a real Gemba for me, but at least I can see their Gemba a little bit from a third-person perspective. And it helps me to kind of weed out. There's sometimes when I want them to be successful, and I want their first experience in doing process improvement to be successful. There's some that I can see are going to be more challenging just by watching what's going on. So I help guide students away from that, right? The next milestone is I want you to list all of the steps that happen in the process that you see in the video. Okay, so let's just watch the video and write down what happens. And I want you to mark the ones that are value added, where some transformation is actually happening. And so I have those as little assignments, right? And then I grade those as I'm going through. And it gives me an opportunity to then coach students to say, hey, let's reevaluate this, or, you're not seeing what I'm seeing with this. Sometimes I'll request that student groups come in and chat with me in person, where we can talk about things or help develop solutions together, or talk about what an approach might be for the project. And so then on a case-by-case basis, we'll do individual coaching then with each team. But I try to give each team individualized advice all the way through to help them to be successful. But it's up to them to actually do that implementation. It's up to them to actually, to make those changes happen.
So they're probably getting a lot of good change management and practical skills working with the organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit, just because you had asked about it. I guess we didn't talk about it much. If you'd like to hear, I loved the Project Cure. Was a good. That was a really fun project to do. especially since a lot of the classic stuff that happens in a process improvement happened during that project where they wanted to go to smaller batch size, right? Smaller batches, more toward a one-piece flow. Not technically a one-piece flow, like take one part off of a truck and classify it, but at least smaller batches to help things flow through. And the manager at the business was saying, well, we've done things this way. This is the way we've always done things, and this is the way. You're welcome to make things neater and put some labels on stuff, but don't mess with the way that the whole work is being done, because I like it that way. That was sort of the thing. And
I've already figured it out.
I coached them. Yeah, right. And so I coached them to say, hey, look, and this, I just said this happens a lot. So why don't we try this tack? Why don't you go and say, hey, instead of redesigning the whole process of the way you do things, can we take this one small category and just create kind of a pilot area over to the side where this little pilot area we would classify or organize the stuff for this one category of supplies that come into Project Cure in this one little area, and it will be a model of the way things could be, and then that way we could just kind of see if it doesn't work. If we do it and it's slower and less reliable and the quality is less and it's more frustrating, well then it won't be a big change. It's just moving a couple tables around, and that's pretty easy. We can move it back. Nothing's changed really. But if it works, at least you'll be able to see that it works, and it will give you some ideas about maybe the way that you could roll this out to the rest of the business. And so we got to do that. So they had to, that was some negotiation, right, that they had to do to create sort of this little pilot line. And as it ended up, it was a huge, huge improvement, and was really received well. I love the Healing Souls project was one where this was if you've seen the video, and maybe you can put the link in your video notes or something, put a link to that one. That was really fun. So the team came to me and said, we've got this charity where we go and we pick up these shoes, and then we take them downtown to where there's a lot of homeless folks, and we sort of set up shop down there, and they come in and they'll trade out their old shoes with holes and everything in them, and then we give them a new or a less used pair of shoes, and we have to find the right size, we have to find the style that they want, those sorts of things. And you'll see in the video how it was originally organized. And so I remember for that team, they were telling me a little about their Gemba, but I wasn't really understanding it much. And I said, I would love to come out with you, and I'll help you do it. They did it on like a Saturday or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I said, let me come out with you one Saturday and do the process with you, and that way I can kind of experience that Gemba as well. And it was so much fun because, as you and your viewers know, one of the most important things about Lean is that you have to have your customer in mind. You have to know, who's my customer? What is it that my customer wants? You can do all kinds of things to improve your internal processes that may make your company's profit better, or whatever internal metrics you have that makes those numbers look better, makes you look good, right? But if it doesn't make a difference in the customer's mind, to the customer, then you haven't really done anything. I mean, it has to have an impact on the customer. And the really neat thing about that project is the customer is right there. And so we were able to identify, and so we had a discussion. What is it that you can see that the customer struggles with, right? And there was it was disorganization, and they were fighting to get in front of one another, and when they saw a shoe that they wanted, or whatever, that they were frustrated that you couldn't find the right size, or you didn't know who was next. It was like this big mob, and you didn't know who was next in line and how that all worked. And then it was taking forever. Like, we timed out how long it took to to interact with one of the customers there. I forget what the timing was, but it was just a long, it was a long time. And so it's like, well, what does the customer want? Well, the customer wants to find exactly the shoe that they want in the size they want it, and they want it to take as little time as possible. And then we also identified in that project that one of the outcomes that we wanted is that most of the people that were involved, and you'll see this in the video, most of the people that were involved with that process had their head in a box looking around like for the right shoe. And that is not face-to-face interaction with the customer. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is reconfigure the process so that the volunteers actually had more meaningful eye-to-eye contact, respectful contact with their customers. And that was important. I mean, that's a side effect of this, is showing, some human respect for folks in this situation. And so that's really how we redesigned the process, is to not only provide faster, higher quality service, but we did it in a way that respected the humanity of the customers, the people that were coming and getting these shoes. And I thought that was just a really, really cool, very unique project. So.
Yeah. And I think that's a great message too. Is we want to this isn't about just making you work faster. It's actually free you up so you can do the more valuable thing. And especially like in some nonprofits, it's that interaction that is really critical with their volunteers to make sure that they're feeling part of the organization and the mission, and with the people they're serving, to make sure that they're having a good experience, and not just to send them through the soup kitchen line, but to actually have a time to talk to them. And that's value added for this process. So I think that's a really important piece. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in a lot of face-to-face nonprofit organizations. That's an important outcome. And if you can remove the waste, this is what we discussed in this project, right? If you can remove the waste from the physical stuff that has to happen in that process, if you can remove the waste from that, it frees you up to have more time to have face-to-face interaction with another human being, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Anuj, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I really one of the projects that we did as nonprofit at Dunwoody is, like you mentioned, that it's very important to have the students make the connection. But for our project, it was a kind of a reverse thing, that we as a faculty, we had one connection with a nonprofit which is called Second Harvest Heartland, and we secured a project from them, and by having multiple meetings over the last summers, and we understood what exactly they need, and then we paired a couple of students to them, with them. And I really get your point that it's very important that it comes from the student, and I think that's the best. I would completely agree to that because they identify the nonprofit and the project by themselves, so they are more enthusiastic. But one thing definitely we also observed, the students were when they initially started working with the project with Second Harvest Heartland, which is a food bank in Minneapolis. Initially there was some there was a rough period, because it was they were not exactly knowing the nonprofit, what exactly they are doing, what is their process. It was a lot of data oriented project, so it was a little bit of overwhelming. But once they started to get some results, and they could see where the nonprofit can use the results for betterment of the community, they got more and more engaged, and they got more and more enthusiastic actually. And I think the nonprofit drive, how their work will impact the community, was the strongest motivation for the students to be involved in the project.
Sure.
And
And I think it can work that way. Yeah, I'm letting you know, in my classroom context, the way it is right now, it works well for students to pick their own. I think it can absolutely work, where you have organizations that approach you, or where you approach organizations and talk with them. I will tell you, I think that that your folks will need to be facilitators of that relationship to help maintain that relationship. There has to be initiative on both sides, both your students or your volunteers that are going, as well as the management of that organization. If either of them drop the ball, the thing will happen. At least that's been my experience. and so you and your members then are the facilitators of that, and you kind of have to stay on top of, how are things going? Are they able to meet? Are they able to go in and have appointments to go in and actually see the processes happen,
Yep.
see how that works? But I completely agree with you. I'll tell you, I learn a lot about. I don't know what generation we're in right now, the millennial generation, but a lot of them are a lot of the young people that are coming out of high school, coming out of college, are very philanthropic. They have a real desire to make a difference, in people's lives, people that are underrepresented, or people that are having struggles or issues in life, and really wanting to make a difference and help those folks.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to get younger people involved, is providing these opportunities. So I'm really glad you guys are doing that.
You also mentioned the videos as a way for you to see the Gemba. I think these days it's almost essential to have that ability to videotape now, and that is our Gemba walks, so to speak, because we can't go into some of these areas, or we shouldn't be going into these areas physically.
Sure.
So do you feel like that works fairly well in terms of you being able to tell what's going on with a videotape? It's not perfect, but a video recording of it.
It does for me. It does for me as a coach, because from a coaching role, I can kind of see what's happening in there. I'm just this is my perspective on process improvement. I'm a firm believer that you cannot improve a process at a fundamental level remotely. It's something that you really need to be in the Gemba with. And I tell my students, there's different levels of being in Gemba. You need to at least be next to where the process is happening, watching it. But I tell them even better is when you can go to the people that are working in that process and say, show me, teach me how. And then you actually try it, because you physically get to experience what it is that they're experiencing, what they have to do daily, every day, all the time. And you get to sense or feel those frustrations, which you don't get to experience on video. Video, to me, the video component does a couple of things. So one, as a coach, it allows me to kind of see what's happening, and as they make progress through, I can see the changes. And video's better than, a lot of times better than just having pictures or a description, because I can see the relationship between a lot of the things that are happening in that process. The other thing that I think is really great about video, I don't know if Paul Akers was the one that thought up this idea of having people do videos and posting them, but I think it really helps with the engagement when people that are involved in process improvement see that the work that they are doing is now visible and it's helping other people in Lean be able to learn from their experience and see what it is that they're doing. It's like I'm sharing this information with the world. This is what we're doing, and then you can learn from that. Just like in your coaching or in your instruction, you use videos. You'll probably pull up, for instance, the Healing Souls video, right, or the Project Cure video, and you'll say, hey, take a look at these. When you then video your students' projects or your volunteers' projects and post them for the world to see, it gives them a sense of importance that, what I'm doing, it's influencing more than just this process that I'm working on. It's really influencing the way work gets done, potentially, for years to come, because people will see this and will take that and learn from it, learn from my experience, and be able to spur on their own creativity. So I think it's really, I think it's good for developing that sense of importance, that what you're doing here is important and actually really making a difference larger than just what you see in front of you.
So
and I have a client that, I was just going to say one of our clients is doing that, and they're seeing that as the way that the culture is changing, is the sharing of ideas across different facilities that have similar processes, and they're saying, oh, I like that. And that never probably would have been communicated in the same way, but they see the video of someone talking about it and sharing it, and they're like, I know that person almost through the video, and I feel like I can reach out to them and ask them more questions or details. So, yeah, I think it works outside of the organization and inside as well. So
I agree.
And that's what we need, is that culture change around improvement. Anush?
Yeah. So Brad, do you ask the students to make video throughout the project, or is it like they make video in like chunks, or they make the video like at the end of the project, like summarizing everything?
So they make the video in chunks. So you know, I tell, for instance, I say video the process happening just as you see it when you walk in, right? And so they do that as a video, and that's really usually a really long video. And then later in the project, as they're beginning to make improvements, I have them give me a video tour of the process where they walk through and say, well, this is the way things were, and here's how we're changing it, and then show me kind of a midway through how that process looks. And then finally at the end, they video the final process actually happening. And then those videos that you see on YouTube are not the entire, all of the video content there. What they've done is they've taken snippets, sort of representative pieces of the before, the middle, and the after, and kind of a tour the way through, and tried to create a best composite of the entire project that can be digested. And I tell them, you know, can be digested within less than 5 minutes is what I'm looking for. So because none of us have the attention span to look more than that. So, and that's really all you need to get the highlights of, this is where the waste was, this is what the challenges were that we faced, here's the work that we did, and here were the results. And it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to give that message. So
cool.
Yeah, the time savings, I think, is really powerful too. Even if it's like I'm saving 5 seconds a day over a year, that's amazing when you crunch the numbers on those. How much?
Oh
time.
yeah, well, yeah. And if you're doing a mini improvement, if you do the process multiple times a day, you're saving. You can surprise yourself at how much time you can save.
Yeah, yeah. We've taken up a lot of your time already. Is there anything else that you wanted to share or talk about, or things you're working on that might be relative to this?
Well, I don't know. I'm glad that you guys are looking into it. I'm glad that you're using my students as some inspiration, perhaps, for impacting some nonprofits and some other organizations. And I'm glad we're in this thing together.
Do you know anyone else who's doing the same kind of approach that you're doing with the student projects? In terms of like at-home applications, or small improvements that they're documenting or sharing? Have you talked to anybody?
Wow.
Or
I'm sure that there are. I guess I'm not aware.
I haven't either. I found anybody else, but
I can't be the only one. So, but
maybe not publicly like you're sharing. That might be the
maybe not
big difference.
It does work for me. Like I said, it brings that. I think teaching lean, especially in a college classroom, can come across it's very sterile, right? It's just definitions of terms and tools and techniques and some math that I can prove that I can do on an exam. And then that does not translate well to real life. And so giving students the opportunity to actually experience it, I think it's an important component, at least for my class, to be able to experience that and bring the classroom material to life. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from students saying that that it really made a difference that they were able to do that. In fact, I'm not teaching over the summer, but it was just last week I had a student that sent me an email and had pictures of a process improvement that she had made, and she just said, "Hey, I had this problem and I fixed it, and I just wanted to let you know that I did this, and it was because of your class that taught me how to do this." It wasn't anything earth-shattering, but it made a difference to her. So it's those sorts of things that I'm looking for, and that's really good.
Yeah, great. Well, cool. I think that's awesome. I appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. Happy to meet you guys.